podcast on real relationships. My name is Sophie Passon and I am a relationship expert, international speaker and best-selling author of Your Half. I've decided to start this podcast because, in my opinion, relationships are currently not being portrayed as what they really are. Whether you're watching the news, TV, social media, the perception given to people is wrong, and my aim is to talk about what really happens in the real world. So I will talk to real people and listen to their stories, what they do, what they go through, what they think, as opposed to creating expectations of things that don't actually exist. I may not agree with everything that is said by my guests, but it is their chance to express their opinions and their stories. So here today we have Darren, and we're going to talk about healthy and happy relationships. Hi, Darren.
Hi, Sophie. Really nice to be asked to be on your podcast. I feel very privileged and lucky to be part of what you're doing here.
Thank you so much. So can you tell me a little bit more about yourself, please?
So I'm 48. And I'm born and bred in Bournemouth, so I've lived here all my life. Family, although no longer have parents alive, but family are from the area, so we've always lived in the area, so we know Bournemouth, Poole, Dorset very, very well. And I set up my business here 13 and a half years ago. So I run a small agency which is based in the heart of Bournemouth, and we look after clients all across Dorset and Hampshire. Again, there's a theme running through what we're going to talk about here because I love Bournemouth. I love living in Bournemouth. I love working in Bournemouth, and although we go travelling quite a lot, I'm always happy to come back to Bournemouth. It's where my heart is.
It's funny you should say that because I'm originally French, but when I was younger, my dad believed languages were the future. So he used to send me places. It started with Germany, and then he sent me to England. And for me, it's Portsmouth. It's just, I woke up and it was just like, oh my God, this is where I belong.
Yeah, I feel the same actually. I belong here in Bournemouth, and I never take Bournemouth for granted. As I said, I love being living and working in the town. I know lots of people after being here all my life, so I just as I say, Sophie, we like travelling, but I'm always happy to come back, and whenever we get off the train or aeroplane or whatever, we always think, it's so nice to be back home.
Yeah. And it's fun, to relate it to relationships. It's a bit like coming home when you find the right person, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's almost like putting on a comfy pair of slippers, I guess, isn't it? And that's how I feel about relationships. To be so comfortable in not only where you live, but also who you're engaging with as well, and who you have a relationship with. That comfort element is so fantastic.
Most definitely. So let me ask you a question. When you were younger, what was your idea of love?
Wow. That's a big question.
I know.
I guess, God, I can't remember when I was young, let alone what I was thinking about. I guess hearts and flowers and romance and couples sweeping each other off their feet. I guess it's very old-fashioned. I guess I am quite an old-fashioned person anyway. So I've never been one to have different relationships or jumping in and out of bed with different people, because I've always looked for that comfiness that we've just spoken about the hearts and flowers, and I guess that's my idea of kind of love and relationships. And that, I guess, comes from growing up in the 70s and 80s, really. Old-fashioned movies, the damsel being swept off her feet at the end of the movie. That's, I guess, because of my age, that's what I've been brought up with.
And it's interesting because I've started asking that question more to people, and I get very, very different answers, obviously because we're all different. But a lot of the time, one of the answers I do get is around perfection. For when they were younger, the idea of love was that it would be the perfect person.
I guess so. And I always think, I've always thought to myself that if you're not in a relationship with somebody that it's not working, or you're not engaged with, or there's issues. And I understand all that. Trust me, I understand all about that. I almost think to yourself, why put yourself through it? If it's not working, kind of move on. And that's easier said than done. And I appreciate that. And that's a very black and white answer. And that's in an ideal world. Absolutely, I appreciate that. But, if you're not happy, do something about it.
I agree. I think I get that you've got to work at something, but in this, next breath, I think that if you've tried, there's a point where, not all relationships, I think we're brought up with this idea that you meet someone at 20 and you spend the rest of your life with them. And the truth is, it's a journey, really.
Absolutely. And I think that, again, that meeting somebody and staying with them forever, again, it's quite an old-fashioned way of looking at things nowadays, because from my humble opinion, people are, it's very general, but people are kind of jumping in and out of relationships, and perhaps they're not giving it a go, or perhaps they're not investing enough time, energy and passion into it, so they just move on to the next person. Whereas an older person, an old-fashioned person, like myself, I was always brought up with mum, dad, always been together, always stayed together. Luckily, I had an amazing childhood with an amazing family. Unfortunately, they're no longer with us, but, so I've been brought up in a very traditional household, mum, dad, and there was three boys.
And I think, yeah, completely. It's probably an idea that's not realistic necessarily. And at the same time, it is, because for some people it does happen. I know that in my particular case, I was probably not ready to properly settle down until about 3-4 years ago. And not through, because I didn't want to. I don't think I met the right people at the time, for starters, but also because the focus was on my career. But actually, every single relationship I went in brought me something that's made me today ready.
Absolutely. And I don't think you are ready at 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 necessarily to settle down, because you have to go through those learning experiences and perhaps have your heart broken a couple of times. I'm not saying you have to, but it's all a learning curve, isn't it? And with my partner now, we've always said, why didn't we meet each other 20, 30, 40 years ago? But there was a reason we didn't, because it wouldn't have worked. And we are very different people now than what we were when we were 20 something. So that's why we kind of answer our own question there. Why did we not meet earlier? Because we were not ready to be in this relationship that we are right now. And
yet you kind of still, I get it, that you still wish you'd spend more time with them, because it feels that the time you've got left is not enough. So how did you meet your partner?
Well, just to give you a bit of background, we've been together for nearly 10 years now. And we met online on a website, which was great. We met quite quickly as well, so it wasn't one of these kind of online relationships that was going on for 6 months. More or less straight away, we hit it off, chatted, the phone calls, right, let's get together. And I'll tell you the story behind it. It was at Christmas time. So we met online just before Christmas, and then we went through Christmas Day and Boxing Day, and he was the one that suggested meeting as soon as possible. And I thought to myself, I'd rather do it after Christmas, just in case we meet and it doesn't connect and it doesn't work. That would really upset me, because we were getting on so well on the telephone and texting and everything else, that I thought, if we meet before Christmas and it doesn't click like I really want it to, I'd rather just have a nice Christmas Day and a Boxing Day.
Fair enough.
And then worry about it later. So, yes, we met the day after Boxing Day. And Sophie, and I'm sure all your listeners will know, you just meet somebody and it literally just goes like that.
I was going to ask, actually, did you both know straight away? So you've kind of answered that.
Yeah, absolutely. Within minutes, and I really genuinely mean that. We met somewhere in Bournemouth. We met at a very well-known place in Bournemouth, and it was 6 o'clock in the evening. And I know what he was wearing, and I even know what I was wearing as well. And we're talking 10 years ago, and we just clicked. And I can't stress that enough. I think it's so important to kind of, I guess, click with a person straight away. But then there is the argument that you grow into knowing somebody and all the rest of it. Now, I'm not saying it was all hearts and flowers from 6, because it wasn't. But we just did click. And I remember we didn't stop talking, and we would just chat. Conversation was free-flowing. And we kind of had organised to meet just for an hour or so for a quick coffee, just to see how it went. And if it didn't work, it would be easy just to kind of come away from it. And then we were chatting for probably a couple of hours. Then we decided to go for something to eat. And then I remember across the table, and I know the restaurant, it's still there now, across the table, our hands touched a couple of times as well. So there was no funny business, but when you're so comfortable with somebody, you just like, your hands might be sweeping over each other, whatever. And then after that, we were just like, should we do this again? Do you want to do this again? That awkward little conversation. Do you like me or don't you like me? Should we meet again or shan't we meet again?
Which is a bit silly, really, because you kind of know that, but you still got that anxiety at the beginning.
That's it. And we both kind of said at the same time, let's do this again, really enjoyed that, had a great evening and all the rest of it. And that was nearly 10 years ago now.
So what do you think makes for a great relationship?
For me, Sophie, this is a very easy one to answer. And Martin and I have discussed this numerous times. For us, it was about ground rules. Very early on, and I don't know where this came from, I don't know whether he brought it to the table or I did, but it was about, let's have a conversation. Not only about who we are, but what we like and what we don't like.
Values.
Kind of, yeah. So it was a case of, we were just sat round, and I can't remember how the conversation started or anything like this, but it was just about ground rules. This is who I am. This is what I like. This is what I don't like. This is how I expect to be treated as well. Now that sounds very cold and callous, but it was a case of, if you're not happy in the relationship, tell me you're not happy. Perhaps we'll be able to do something about it. Perhaps we won't. But never do anything behind my back, because I would hate that, and he would as well. Never do anything behind my back. Never cheat or anything like that, Sophie. Just kind of respect me and our relationship. And if you're not happy, that's fine. We will face it together, and if it's time to move on, it's time to move on. But fundamentally, don't cheat.
And I think the issue is that that conversation when you're not happy, it's a bit like, when I come from we were allowed to have a smack on the hand or whatever when I was little. And actually, if someone smacks your hand, it's not the smack that hurts, it's the anticipation of the hand falling. And it's the same with that conversation when you're not happy. People are so scared of a reaction, which is why the conversation often doesn't take place.
I guess there is some fear there as well. So straight away, we knew we had ground rules in place for our amazing relationship. So then there's no confusion then, Sophie, is there? There's no, I didn't know that about you, or I didn't know you didn't like that, or I didn't know that's how you wanted to be treated. Because we got it out in black and white when we started. So then there's no confusion. And it's such a simple thing to do. Just to say, this is who I am, this is what I like, and this is what I don't like, and this is how I like to be treated. You can't go wrong then, surely.
Definitely. But like in any relationships, there are always challenging times. So what do you think has pulled you through those?
Just being there for each other, really. And also appreciating who we are as individuals. I'll give you an example. I like time on my own. I have a hugely busy work life. So when I go home, sometimes I just want to chill and I just want to put my feet up and do absolutely nothing. And Martin knows that. And when he comes home from work as well, he works very different hours than what I do. I know to leave him be, don't crowd him. Just he needs to chill and come home and take that mask off that we all have to put on every day, all day. So it's kind of learning those things and developing those things kind of along the way.
And also not trying to change the person to what your preferred way, shall we say?
Yes, I think certainly in our relationship, and I'll tell you, there was issues that were coming to the forefront early on in our relationship. And I wasn't saying to Martin, don't do this, I want you to do this. But I was informing him about, again, I like this and I don't like this. This is what we could and should be looking at doing. And we both take that on board. So it's not a case of don't do this. It's a case of perhaps we need to think about that, or I'd rather you didn't behave in that sort of way. Because I think if you tell people to do or not to do something, they will go the opposite way. You know, you tell a child not to do that, and inevitably they will go and do it anyway. But if you kind of can coax and coach people along the way as to what you want them to do, that is better than telling somebody to do it.
Yeah, and I think, it's about communication and how you put it across. Some people believe in marriage and some don't. We all have our own views. Is it something that's important to you?
Yes, I think it goes back to what we said earlier, Sophie, about I'm quite an old-fashioned person, always been brought up in that kind of environment. Parents who adored each other and were together many, many, many years from children. So again, I've always been brought up in that family unit. So do I believe in marriage? Absolutely. We are civil partners and we have our marriage date set for next year. We had, over the last 10 years, we've had various discussions about should we get married? Shouldn't we get married? Do you want to? And I think we're just at a stage in our life now where we both decided, more or less at the same time, yeah, okay, let's do this. And because of financial reasons and owning properties and all that legal aspect that comes with being in a relationship, we thought, yeah, we want to make this legal now. Mm-hmm. So earlier this year, we had a civil partnership. So in the eyes of the law, we are as one now, we are as a couple, which is great. And then next year we actually get married, so it's more of the kind of...
The emotional side.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. So that's June next year.
Okay. And do you think sometimes people get married too quickly? Probably even when they're younger?
Oh, absolutely. You know, we've all heard of stories, haven't we, of somebody getting married at 18, 19, perhaps when they're travelling or something like that. And then a year later, it's all gone belly up. I think any kind of advice there would be we change so much, especially in our 20s and 30s as well. You know, so the person that you are, perhaps when you're entering into a relationship at 18, is not the person you're going to be when you're 25 and 30. So I guess it's about, if you're with somebody, great. If you're in a relationship, that's fine. But just do be aware that relationships change and your perception and you as a human being will change considerably.
What about people who get married within 3 to 6 months?
Sometimes it works.
I know the person, as in I know of them and I've met them when I was a child, but I can't remember them, if that makes sense. But my mum was telling me once of someone who they met and 3 months later they were married, and actually that was 10 years ago.
Great. Yeah, sometimes it works. I don't think we can be so black and white in this life to say that, young marriages don't work, because they do. You've already told me that, So But an advice point of view from me would be, we do change a lot. And if you're with that right person, you can change together. Great.
And this is the thing, is growing in the same direction. So what advice would you give someone who's actually just starting out in a new relationship? Although I think I know the answer to that.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what I said earlier about setting some ground rules. This is what I like, this is what I don't like. And just then there's no confusion, Sophie, then, is there? There's no, oh, I didn't know that. Why did you not tell me that? Otherwise I wouldn't have done that, or I wouldn't have said that, or I wouldn't have treated you like that. But I think that also goes throughout the relationship as well. So if somebody is doing something wrong, that's not really what I mean, but I don't know how else to say that.
I know what you mean. For me, the way I sometimes explain what you're trying to say too is with marriage vows. It's not just about the vow you make on that day. You should renew them every day in your own head, as it were.
Absolutely. So it's about, certainly for me, is about telling that person who you are, what you like and what you don't like. That's great. Then there's no confusion. But there's also the fact that you should revisit, as you've already said. Well, where are we? Are we okay? Are we okay with this? Are we okay with that? Are we going in the right direction? Are we supporting each other? I think so. Just nurturing as well. There's 2 points I want to pick up there. I think nurturing your relationship is so key. It's almost like treating it like a third person. It's almost treating like a child. This relationship is growing, it's developing, just as a human being does as well. So you really need to kind of look after it. Are we okay with this? What's going on here? And just making sure that both parties are still comfortable, happy, and going in the right direction. The other point I want to talk about there is the fact that just to say to each other that you love them all the time.
We all need reassurance anyway.
Oh, I'm the biggest one that needs reassurance all the time. Yes. So again, laying down the rules. I like to be told that you love me. And I like to be told on a regular basis. So if somebody stopped doing that, they're kind of disrespecting what you need. So Martin knows I like to be reassured all the time about where we are, where the relationship is, what I'm doing, and all the rest of it. So again, because I've told him that's what I really, really like. That's what he does, and we have loads of things like hanging up in the house, like these inspirational sayings about what makes love and blah 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 blah. Anyway, and it's those things that, again, because I've asked for it, he knows that that's what I really like and that's what ticks my boxes.
I was just about to say that's what makes you tick, as it were. I think what I see a lot of with relationships that are not working is a lot of the time it's actually the little details and routine, because people go through life and they stop talking about the little things because it doesn't matter, does it? But actually it does, and the minute that they stop doing that is when they start to take a different path.
Absolutely, and there's a saying: "Is they're not about the devil? The detail is it? No, the devil is in the detail." Is that what it is? So, just making sure that you are talking on a regular basis. With Martin and I, we are always revisiting our relationship and reevaluating and changing and saying, "This is where we're going." And I'll tell you a little secret. So this is between us two, obviously. And we have our little saying, and it's together we achieve. And it's kind of a bit of a strapline that we've come up together because we feel that together we are achieving. And there's many examples over the years that we've done together, we've achieved something together, we're moving on with our life together because it's that togetherness that brings us together. Kind of pun intended. And that's our little strapline. Together we achieve.
And I think this is the thing. A lot of the time, yes, you are two individuals and you do need your own space, your own time, your own this, that and the other. But in the next breath, it is about companionship as much as anything else.
That's it. Absolutely. It's about companionship. Now, the other thing, Sophie, that from my humble opinion makes for a really good relationship is the not to be in each other's pockets all the time. Now, I'll give you a couple of examples there. I actually go on holiday on my own. Not all the time, probably about once a year. Because, again, I go back to the point, I have a very busy work life. And sometimes I just want to go away and just be. And just be on my own. And I like being on my own anyway. I don't have a problem with being on my own at all. So, a few years ago, Martin and I went to Venice for a holiday. Both really enjoyed it. Martin had been there before, I hadn't. And I really, really liked Venice. And had a desire to go back and enjoy it again. Martin and I discussed about it, which we've talked about enough now, and we talked about it. We sat down. I said, "I really want to go," and he said, "I don't want to go again. I've been there." And I said, "Well, I really do." So we just come up with a solution, and the solution was for me to go on my own. Great. So I went to Venice, absolutely loved it. All I did was just walk around, have a coffee, sit down, have a cake, just literally watch the world go by. Because it works for me, Sophie. And we decided that was great, and Martin gives me plenty of time to do things like that. So only this year I went to Washington on my own. Again, just 4 days, 5 days. All I did is just wander, just be on my own. Martin didn't want to go to Washington. He didn't want to go to America. Great. I love America. So how can anybody stop you from doing something you really want to do? Because it ticks your boxes.
And I think this is the thing as well, we forget that we do also need time to miss each other.
That's it. And we miss each other tremendously when we're away. And when I come back, I always think to myself, oh my God, I'm never doing that again. As in, like, go away without Martin. But later on in the year, I might think, oh, I fancy a couple of days there. So it's not about being away from Martin. It's about allowing each other to do things that work for you. So it's about being flexible, understanding each other's needs, and allowing each other to do what it is to keep them happy. So if I was with somebody that said, you can't do this and you can't do that, and if we go on holiday, we're going together, you're just going to fight against that, surely, anyway, aren't you?
And the thing is, you don't, as you say, you don't always want to go to the same places or go back to the same places. So if someone was struggling in their relationship and listening to us right now, what would you say to them?
Probably two things. First of all, get it straight in your head about where you're suffering and why you're suffering and what's not working. But also go back to the person and talk to them about how you're feeling. Because what that person can't argue against is how you're feeling, because they're your feelings. They're not that person you're living with. They're your feelings. So nobody can say to you, you're not feeling that, you're not feeling that, because they're your feelings. So only you can own your own feelings. So think about what the issue is and where the issue is, and is it with you, or is it with the relationship, or is it with the other person? So really understand where that thought process is coming from. But then, as I say, just to sit down and communicate. As far as I'm concerned, I know it's very black and white, but communication is the key. We often sit down and say, oh, babe, I'm feeling really down at the moment. I don't know why, but... And it's always nice to share that with someone else. It's just one example I use. But just being open, communicative, and happy to share where you are, I think, as well. It's so key.
And I think the other thing as well is you might be scared to be having that conversation, but actually the outcome, if you don't have that conversation, is going to be far worse.
Absolutely. And sometimes, well, I say sometimes, most of the time, if you sit down and have a conversation with somebody and say, I'm feeling really fed up because you said this or you did this. If you talk about that, most of the time it would be, I never meant it like that. I meant it like this. Or I didn't realise that what I said or what I did made you feel like that. And I'm really sorry for doing that. But if you don't have that conversation, no one's going to know. So you might just be bottling up something that is kind of wasn't meant to be said in that manner or in that circumstance.
And the other thing as well is, acceptance that there's an issue is the first step. So finally, one last question for you. Do you have any regrets?
What, in life in general, or as in a relationship?
Either or.
That's an interesting question. Simple answer is no. Even in perhaps past relationships, they have served a purpose. You could be in a relationship and it's not working and it's time to move on and all the rest of it. But you take so much out of that. So somebody who could be in a relationship that's not working for either partners, and then you come out of that relationship and then you can think to yourself, that's not what I want in a relationship going forward. So you've learnt something, haven't you? It's not been a waste of time. That relationship did not work because it wasn't ticking X, Y, and Z box for me. So going forward, that's what I will try and avoid.
And that's a very good point, because unfortunately a lot of people look at failed relationships as, I'm not going to say something bad, but it's normally the other person's fault. And then you see quotes on the internet like, you were a bad person anyway, and so, you can have someone else because they deserve you because you're so bad or whatever. I can't remember what the exact thing is. And actually it's not, in the same way as you go to a car boot sale and someone's junk is being sold there and it's someone else's treasure. It just meant that it wasn't right for you.
That's it. And I think it comes back to some chemistry as well, Sophie, that perhaps the chemistry isn't right in your relationship, and no matter how hard you might try at it, that's not going to work because the chemistry isn't right. When you find that person where it does click, then you know that the chemistry is right. And everything up to that point has been a lesson that you've learned.
I couldn't agree more. Well, Darren, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
No, thank you, Sophie. I really enjoyed that. I always say to people, life is not black and white. Some of the answers I've given you here are not black and white, very grey. It's down to the individual, it's down to the person, it's down to circumstances, it's down to who they are, where they've been previously. So I understand that, life is a grey area, isn't it? And there's no right or wrong answer.
Or a box of chocolate. Well, thank you so much. And if you enjoyed the show, then please subscribe and give us a review. But more importantly, come back for the next episode. Thank you.